Thanks for standing by and welcome to the CurveBeam AI Investor Webinar for the quarter ended December 2025. All participants are in listen-only mode. There'll be a presentation provided by management, followed by Q&A based on questions that have been submitted via email or live during the session. So if you have a question you'd like to submit, please do so using the Q&A function within Zoom. On the webinar from CurveBeam AI today, we have the Managing Director and CEO, Greg Brown, CTO and COO, Arun Singh, and the CFO, Eura Auckland. The presentation will last for approximately 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll get into the questions. But to kick it off, I'll hand it over to Greg.
Thanks, Matt, and welcome everybody to our Q2 Fiscal Year 26 quarterly update. A lot to update everyone on today. Firstly, in the second quarter, we received 5 orders, 5 devices for Q2 of Fiscal Year 26. All 5 devices were from the US. There was 4 high-rise and 1 liner. Now, I know the next topic is of great interest to a lot of our investors. Our commercialization agreements with Wagow Orthopedics and the progress on the initial payment of the $4 million milestone, placing at 40 cents a share. The update on that is the funds. Well, the good news, first of all, is, as we've shared with the market, the Chinese outbound directive investment control, which any company in China has to get approval for before doing a strategic investment. Well, the full $10 million investment at the 40 cents is approved. So the ODI approval is in place for the full 10 million. Now, the first payment is the first 4 million. Those funds actually transferred before the long weekend. We had a press release ready to go earlier in the week. What we didn't factor on was the fact that the funds have actually transferred to an intermediary bank, which was CommBank. And this is where it's going through the Australian controls, which are anti-money laundering. There's Austrade controls. And so we expect that to clear shortly and be transferred to our NAB account. So we expect that in the next 7 days now. And we'll, of course, announce that when the funds have landed in our account. But the funds are in Australia. They're in an intermediary bank and just going through Australian regulatory controls before it clears to our account. So I think that will be well received by investors, and we'll keep you appraised when the funds land in our account. Now, we continue to work with Wagow. We've continued to advance the regulatory position for the US manufactured high-rise product. And there's been significant promotional activities, which I'll go into with a bit more detail within the presentation. With the applicable registration number, there's a lot of pre-promotion that's going on. That started November. There's been sales training, KOL visits over December and January. So there's a full court press going on the pre-marketing for building sales for when our Chinese FDA comes into place. So we'll talk about that further in the presentation. We also submitted the BMD at the end of Q2. We are still targeting a clearance mid-year. We've had some clarification questions that we've addressed with FDA, but still on track and excited with meeting that milestone. And we had 400 data points in there, and we're very encouraged by the data that's being presented. We also engaged, and this is a significant change that has occurred. While our vendor validation remains pending, there's been a material change in the engagement. And we're talking at a very senior level within Stryker and all divisions, and including above the divisions. And right now, the senior level alignment is really starting to come together. I mean, everyone sees this as a major plus to have this validation in place. That's the first major point to make. But there's still requirements that we need to do for the regulatory labeling change and for showing that the performance is equivalent or better than what is available today. And right now, the file is no longer idle, stuck in a queue. I think our offer of supporting additional resources has really been well received. This way, it takes us out of hurting the other priorities they have, but still keeps us progressing. And so right now, we have resource discussions underway. We also have discussions to, build to an agreed plan to advance this program. So we feel that, while there's further meetings occurring this week, we'll be able to update the market in due course as to how that's progressing. But we're no longer just stuck on a shelf waiting for other programs to complete to be considered. This is now active planning, and they're accepting our offer to help the resourcing so that we can get this through as soon as possible. So on the order front, it's really important to note that, with the sales for the last 2 quarters, all sales have been US based. Now, the sluggish sales in Europe right now is really related, and it's more of a timing issue than it is an interest in the product issue. And this is around the fact that, particularly in Germany, customers are waiting for the outcomes on the DVT payment levels. So presently today, there are about 300 in the workers' compensation. They can be as high as 500 euros. But people are waiting for that final payment to come through. And that's why a lot of this slowdown is primarily related to, wanting clarity on what that payment level is. And this is why you're seeing a lot more contribution occurring only from the US. We expect that payment decision has either come out or about to come out, and hopefully that will start to re-stimulate some of our prospects that we're advancing within Europe. Receipts from customers were around 2.6 million. We're finding that, the company is carrying forward around about 5.1 million, about 4.8 that we have carrying forward in receivables into Q3. So on the update with Weigao Orthopedics and Wei Ying, we had the big national Chinese orthopedics conference in Tianjin. That was an amazing experience, 26,000 surgeons. We had a very prominent position on the stand. There was also materials across this board. There was a large screen that was continually showing the high rise in action. This event really stimulated a lot of interest in the product. We saw firsthand the Weigao robotics system was also on the stand, which was just behind the high rise. So we're very excited about this. That first payment, of course, has been approved, or the full payment, or the full amount of the ODI approval for the 10 million is in place. That first instalment is in the throes of being received by us here in Australia, and we continue to support this effort. So there's been part of our team up there supporting KOL visits, sales visits, smaller regional conferences, and now they're training their sales team. So there is a team of salespeople being trained for launching this product. It just shows the commitment behind the product and the readiness to prepare the market for our high rise. So on the validation program, as I've shared, we engaged with senior executives on the 13th of this month. The alignment at that senior level is very good. Everyone wants this to happen. It's just how do we get it through with so many other priorities and the limited resources that they have at this point. Our offer has been, I think, well received to help support additional resourcing to get our program through. It's been received well, and with that in line, we're no longer passive in a queue. We're really off the shelf and into active planning to complete the program. So further meetings are going to be occurring next week, and we'll update the market when appropriate on the progress around this. But it was really encouraging for all of us in that meeting at the very senior levels of Striker, just how important this project is to them as well, but how do they manage this priority? And our resource offer, I think, is being well received and allowing us to move this through the process. So we're encouraged by that, and we look forward to further updates when appropriate. And it's important to understand the BMD strategy progresses. So I've got the MDCT here. This is the normal lying down CT that people would go to when they have a CT scan. That is the first product that we get the BMD clearance on. And that filed in Q2. We've already addressed our first round of clarifications for FDA on that file, and it continues to progress. There's around 400 patients' data points that support the file, and we're targeting middle of the year. Now, that clearance on the MDCT, of course, offers MDCT BMD capabilities, but the primary requirement today for such, a fast bone density test, because waiting lists can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months in the US. This is really designed for the stat market, which is a patient presents with hip fracture, pelvic fracture, femur fracture. They're elderly, they're doing a restoration of function, and they need to plan. They want to know what's the quality of the bone they're about to do that restoration in. And this is important for making their decisions quickly on the type of implant, whether they're cementing or non-cementing, and whether they need to have a management of an underlying bone quality issue. So here, while it's a very modest market, it's still an important opportunity that we're going to target for the MDCT, and that's the first stage of that regulatory. The second stage is then doing a special 510K showing that the BMD is equivalent between the MDCT and the high-rise. And to do that, we'll be collecting significant trial data over the next 6 months, ready to file that special on the clearance of the MDCT. So that's the update. We've got some good progress. We're encouraged by the data, and we're looking forward to not only delivering that MDCT product, but also filing a special 510K soon after with the appropriate supporting data to then get the BMD on the high-rise. So on a cash analysis, when you look at our pro forma position with the 4 million coming in from that first milestone, we're just over $8 million in cash. That's from a pro forma position. I think it's really important to note that we had some extraordinary one-offs in the quarter as well. We had to commit to more stock of the V2 subassembly. We had our R&D tax concession that also came through, but it's important to note that our cash used from operations in the last quarter was around 2.15, and we have a pro forma cash position of around just over 8 million. You'll note this is the whole Wagow team that was on the stand. There was Arun, myself, Frank, and others there to support the event with our CTO, Dr. Yu Peng. A great team of people, and we're very excited to be working with both Wagow Orthopedics and Wei Ying in placing our devices in China. So just recapping how we define what is a purchase order and when to expect the receipt, because that can vary from anywhere from 2 to 6 months based on installation, getting a room ready, first of all, getting the room analysed for whether it needs changes, getting the room ready, the placement, the training, and when we can recognise the revenue. And we lay that out under these definitions. So on that note, that's covered off on the key points for the quarter's update. If I can hand that back to you, Matt, for questions.
Thanks, Greg. As you've alluded to, we'll move on to the Q&A. As a reminder to everyone in the audience, again, if you have a question you'd like to submit, do so using the Q&A option within Zoom, and we'll get to those shortly. Greg, just to start off, and I know you touched on it there, the company advised that it was 30 to 60 days for the cash to be received back on the 30th of October. So again, can you just remind people on the status of that and maybe a bit of colour on why it's taken longer than expected to come through?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Look, at the time of that release, I think it was October 30th, which was announcing the strategic relationship with Weigao for China. Look, what we pointed out in that was that we could only give an estimate, and the Chinese Outbound Directive Investment Board, that's an approval that's needed for any company to make a strategic investment in an overseas company. Now, that's always out of the company's control. It's an internal regulatory process, and we can only give our best estimate on the timing of that. And what we did was we gave 30 to 60 days on that estimate. It just occurred just over the 60 days for the ODI, and that was for the approval for the full 10 million at 40 cents, not just the 4 million. And that's an important point to note because we won't have that requirement going forward for the other milestone-based payments. Now, the actual transfer of the cash, and we've learned a lot through this first process of this first tranche, I think will become more efficient going forward, and that's where we have to factor in the time for our own Australian regulatory requirements before it can land in our fund, in our account. So it was the best estimate that we could give at that time, understanding that we don't have control on the ODI process, and that's why we're 2 to 3 weeks late on that estimate.
Thanks, Greg. Sticking with China, can you just give the latest on that China joint venture strategy, what milestones have been reached and what you're expecting next?
Yeah, look, so the first milestone was the signing of the definitive agreements, and that was the IP licensing, it was the subscription, it was the escrow, there was a distribution for the US product into China, and of course the manufacturing agreements. So for all those definitive agreements to be signed was the first milestone. Now, the next near-term milestones are going to be the Chinese FDA clearance, then the first orders. Now, we see that the first order and the CFDA will most probably go hand in hand. So when the CFDA comes through, we would expect both the milestone payment for the CFDA and the first order for 10 units, which represents around 4.6 million Australian dollars, with the additional milestone payments all coming through around the same time. Then there's a further placement, and then of course the Skyrise prototyping milestone also. So at this point, the near-term milestones I would say will be the CFDA and that first payment. The second payment, which could be soon after that, represents a significant number of devices as well, around the 20 million Australian dollar sales mark. So we're quite encouraged that by hitting these next 2 to 3 near-term milestones, it has an impact on both our cash from the placement of that money at 40 cents for the milestone, but also around what could be close to 23 million Australian dollars revenue on the 2 order milestones. So they're the near term. We're very excited. We're also very excited just how quickly they're building their capabilities of pre-selling and getting the market ready for buying Highrise.
And in terms of the Chinese FDA approval, what's the expected timeline on that?
Look, anything to do with regulatory authorities, it's dependent on their regulatory review. And from a planning and guidance standpoint, we're assuming calendar year 2026 for that CFDA approval. Now, our partner is already preparing for a potential mid-year scenario from a commercial readiness perspective. But, as I point out, it's hard to predict with any accuracy any regulatory authority, and our guidance is calendar year 2026.
And the question that's come through is, as you do this broader commercial rollout in China, will you be able to share updates on early high-rise installations or hospital engagements?
We definitely will. I think that, we would work with our partners to, get an updated list. We may not share the prospect list, but we can definitely share where we're placing devices. Yes.
Thank you. And then just switching over to away from China, has Stryker provided a formal timeline or decision point for full integration for Mako, or are we still stuck on the shelf until their other priorities are completed?
Look, I think we made some big progress. There's a lot of relief internally. We're no longer just stuck on a shelf. The validation is still pending, but there's material change in the engagement at the senior levels, even above the divisions. And right now, the encouraging news is that, we're working to this new jointly developed validation plan where what gets us out of the queue is this, offer of helping to cover some of the resources needed to complete the project. So, in that regard, I think that, no, we're not stuck on the shelf anymore. I think we're an active project. We're pulling together a plan, and it'll be a defined plan internally with the highest levels of approval within Stryker to prove our validation of performance and to do the labeling change. And we hope that we can, give the market an update, when appropriate, with an agreed timeline within the highest levels within Stryker.
Thank you. And then another question is, after the BMD module is approved in the US, are there plans to submit to the Chinese FDA too? And if so, when would that be?
That's an excellent question. And yes and yes, but we need to collect the data. Now, we have two strategies there. We'll be running both the bone mineral density and the bone microstructure as part of that CFTA, BMD going first, but also a microstructure. So we're just setting up trial sites, working with our partner to do both microstructure and BMD. And timing on that at this point is a little bit early, but, when I do have, the opportunity in our first review meeting with Weigao, we'll be able to give some definitive guidance on what we think the timing for both the BMD and the bone microstructure will be.
I have no further questions, so I'll just throw it back to you to provide a concluding comment.
Yeah, look, the orders from Europe have been a bit sluggish. We expect that's a timing issue, not a interest issue in the product. We think that our vendor financing will be attractive to help us move forward some of those prospects. We just need this final decision on payment landed on within the German system. I think that will really open up that opportunity again for us in Europe. It's really encouraging to see what orders are coming through are actually just the US. So anything coming through beyond that will be, on top of the US market. And if you look at our history, Europe and international market has always contributed well to our order numbers. So at this point, we expect that once that decision is landed, we'll start to see a lot more activity building in the international market. And look, I think the biggest advance that we saw this quarter was really the engagement from Stryker at the highest levels and wanting to share how important this is to them as well, but where it lies in their priorities, what their limitations are. They've accepted our offer to help there, and we're now, pulling together a definitive plan. And it's just good to be taken off the shelf and into an active plan to a resolution as quickly as possible. So on those notes, just want to thank everyone for their time today. We're available for any further questions, post the call. Just let us know. Thank you.